Well, it's that time for our news review. Sally's here to go through the papers with us.
Right, let's start with the Times front page, reporting on Vladimir Putin, who said Russia's new relationship with the United States will be based upon equality, mutual respect and non-interference in each other's internal affairs. His comments follow the Russian president's first phone call with President-elect Donald Trump.
Meanwhile, in China, President Xi Jinping said that stepping up cooperation is the only choice for Beijing and the US. The South China Morning Post says his comments were made after the Chinese premier's first phone call with President-elect Donald Trump.
The Times, their world section, looks at what's going on in India, where deaths have been reported after bank customers waited hours and hours to try and exchange recalled banknotes. At least 16 people are believed to have died after being unable to purchase medicine, as vast queues continue to form outside banks and cash machines in India.
The Financial Times says the global bond market rout has intensified and the dollar has strengthened on the belief that US President-elect Donald Trump's commitment to economic stimulus will herald faster growth.
And the Telegraph, their business pages report on Samsung, who focused their ambitions on smart car technology. The electronics giant is buying parts supplier Harman International Industries for $8 billion, the biggest acquisition in the Korean group's history.
And finally, the Japan Times has this photo of the brightest moon seen in London for almost 69 years. The phenomenon, known as a supermoon, won't appear as big or bright for at least another 18 years.
And I missed it. I didn't
see it.
Did you? Did you see it, Cornelia?
No, I did not see it.
I can't believe it. The biggest, brightest moon for decades. And
some of us have to work.
Extraordinary.
We're not on it. This is Cornelia Meyer, who I'm sure you know very well, Chief Executive of MRL Corporation, a familiar face. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. So, let's start with the... which one did we begin with? We began with the Times. New era in US-Russia relations? What do you think?
It's a little bit of a déjà vu. I remember Mrs. Clinton with the reset button, which she used the wrong term in Russian, but never mind. You know, it's good if they're trying to get along, but it's going to be very difficult and fraught with all sorts of obstacles. Let's look at Syria. You know, if you side with Russia, you side with Assad, you also side with Iran, and you side against your ally Saudi Arabia if you're America. So it's a nice thought, and let's hope that they can make it work towards a more constructive relationship. But is Mr. Putin really America's friend? Probably not. So a more constructive relationship would be great, but let's not get ahead of ourselves.
It's quite interesting, actually, because our correspondent in Moscow, Steve Rosenberg, was looking at the excitement ahead of this election, at the prospect of a Donald Trump win. And you couldn't have had two candidates with two, polar opposite views on Russia, because Hillary Clinton, of course, are very outspoken about her thoughts on President Putin, and also, of course, about the possibility of Russia being involved in the US election.
Yeah, and that is, I think, that is speculation. Maybe, if you work for the security services, you would know. But I don't know.
You couldn't have two extreme candidates when it comes to Russia.
And I think one thing, if they can actually have a reset button, as Hillary Clinton tried when she started being foreign minister, when they can have a reset button and try to get that relationship on a little bit more rational footing and understand each other's concerns, because Russia also has concerns. It was concerned by the ever increasing eastward movement of NATO, of the EU. So if they can start to listen to each other, that would be good. But as always, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and foreign policy is a very, very complex, is built on very, very complex constructs. So it may not quite be as easy as Mr. Trump thinks it is.
It's interesting about the proof is in the eating. I gather they've created a Trump burger in Russia to celebrate Mr. Trump's win. Such is the warmth of feeling to him. And actually, you mentioned Steve Rosenberg. If you follow him on Twitter, he does an excellent review of the Russian papers each day. Really interesting kind of get their take on all these developments.
Oh, fantastic.
So let's stick with the Donald Trump story and his relations with China. Interesting that you have two different versions of the same event. Mr. Trump speaking very warmly, and yet, far more muted language, I suppose, from Xi Jinping, sort of saying cooperation. is the only way.
Well, cooperation is the only way, but Xi Jinping must feel rather bruised, because remember, during the election, Trump came out and said some terrible things about China and wanted to increase tariffs to 45% in his quest of, ever greater America and no imports and preserving U.S. jobs. Again, it's not that easy, and if you're Xi Jinping, you're not used to this sort of rhetoric. You're not used to this sort of bruising rhetoric.
I say that though, but at previous election campaigns, in previous years, China's always been beaten up a bit.
Never to that
they talk about the currency and how it's been manipulated.
Yeah,
I know it's on another level with Donald Trump, but everything was on another level with Donald Trump.
That's true, but it was just so out there. But Xi Jinping is right. I mean, cooperation is the only way. These are the two big, the first and second economy in the world. They have to cooperate. What I found very encouraging is that Xi Jinping came out and said, I think it was last night, and said, even if America would abrogate the Paris Agreement on climate change, China would stick with it. And China needs to stick with it, because if they don't do anything about the environment, people will literally choke to death.
Now, let's move on. Looking at the Times' take on what was announced, very surprisingly, without warning, in India last week, literally overnight, India was told, we're removing the 500 and the 1,000 rupee notes from circulation. They're no longer legal tender, and the banks were shut the next day. This was sort of a government manoeuvre. It seems to be backfiring on Narendra Modi, doesn't it?
It is backfiring, and I understand why he's doing it, because there's an awful lot of tax evasion, there's an awful lot of corruption, of illicit trade. So it's very good to get those big notes out so you can get things on a better footing. But doing it as he did it, if you do something on that massive a scale, you need to think of the logistics of it.
You need plans in place, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. You need to think of the logistics of it, and somebody in his government clearly didn't think of the logistics of it, and now they're suffering for it, and this is all a sort of a little bit of a mess up, I would say.
We'll see how that one works out.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's the sort of thing you take for granted, isn't it? That you can just go to a cash machine and get cash out when you want it. That's obviously not the case for people in India.
Well, yeah, if you live in places like here or America, but if you live in places with, like Mozambique, or in places like
rural India,
rural India, maybe it's a different kettle of fish.
Strongly to find machines that have got cash in them, I think that's the problem. Let's go back to the US elections briefly. Financial Times, this acceleration in the rout in the bond market.
Yeah, it's amazing, because $1 trillion was wiped off the bond markets, global bond markets, since the Trump election. That's quite a big number.
Just explain why, for the layman watching us right now, for the non-financial viewer. Just explain why.
What happens is, if you think that interest rates are rising, that means that yes, you may have higher yield, but the value of the bond goes down. So that's how fixed income works.
And market watchers believe interest rates will go up next year more robustly, because inflation is more likely to go up next year.
They will think that interest rates will go up. They think that inflation will go up, because Trump has announced this massive stimulus, and the stimulus needs to be financed somehow. So there will be more debt in the U.S. system, so interest rates will go up. Inflation will go up. Now, it's been very bad, especially for emerging markets. You saw the Mexican peso drop 20%. Also the non-free trade agenda makes a lot of people who produce, who manufacture and sell to the U.S. Makes these countries very, very vulnerable. So you saw that in some Asian currency. You saw it in the Mexican peso. You saw the copper appreciation that you saw. But again, when we talk about these infrastructure projects, these are ultra-long cycle projects. It's not going to go as fast as we think it goes.
Now, because you didn't see the moon, we'll just talk about Samsung really quickly. A big deal, a big announcement, a big spend for Samsung at a critical time for the company.
Yeah, and a very clever spend. If you look at it, Apple and Google are trying to move in that direction as well. Cars. Because one does think that by 2025, in 9 years' time, this is a $100 billion market. So everybody's trying to move into
cars, driverless cars.
Tech cars, driverless cars, getting Wi-Fi in your car, all of those things. So all the tech companies are moving that way, because it's $100 billion, and it's going to get carved up somehow or the other. And the early movers will be the guys with the big market share.
Sounds like simple business model to me, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Deceptively simple, in fact. Yeah.
We'll see how it pans out.
Yeah.
It's never as simple as it seems.
Indeed.
Thanks, Cornelia.
Cornelia,
Thank you
thanks for
very
talking
much.
us through those. Really good to see you. That's it for the newspaper review. For the moment, we'll be back with more news for you in just